Hi, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us. For those of you in Houston watching, I hope you are safe, hunkered down, and staying out of the weather for Tropical Storm Beta. I am hoping our Zoom good Wi-Fi karma holds out tonight. I think we're doing well so far, knock on wood. But it is my absolute pleasure to be joined by three of my favorite people. I've got Rachel Howzell Hall, Kellye Garrett, and Kristopher Zgorski here with me tonight. I'm going to just introduce them and then leave them to chat. As usual, if you have any questions, you can pop them in the comments. I'll be monitoring the comments on this and come back on in a little bit to go through those. But here are our official introductions. Rachel Howzell Hall is the author of 8 novels, including They All Fall Down and The Good Sister, co-written with James Patterson in the New York Times bestselling anthology, The Family Lawyer. Rachel is also the author of the critically acclaimed Detective Eloise Norton series and her brand new suspense novel, And Now She's Gone, which is out today. There it is. Rachel is a member of the board of directors of Mystery Writers of America and a former mentor for AWP's Mentor to Mentor program. She lives in Los Angeles with her husband and daughter. Hello, Rachel.
Hey, hey, hey. I'm so excited.
We're so excited. Kellye Garrett spent 8 years working in Hollywood, including a stint writing for Cold Case, the first book in her Detective by Day mystery series, Hollywood Homicide. Won the Agatha, Lefty, and Independent Publisher Ippy Awards for the best first novel.
Too. Don't forget my Anthony.
And your Anthony, I'm so sorry. Your Anthony too.
Right there.
Excellent. A former magazine editor, she holds a BS in magazine writing from Florida A&M and an MFA in screenwriting from USC's famed film school. She now works for a leading media company and brainstorms ways to commit murder for her novels. We're all, hi, how are you?
Hello.
Kristopher Zgorski, who is our guest moderator this evening, is the creator of Bolo Books, which was awarded the Raven Award from the Mystery Writers of America in 2018. Yay, Chris. How are you doing tonight?
I'm very excited to be here.
Well, I am excited to hear all three of you discuss both of these ladies' works. It's going to be a treat for me, and I'm going to go away and leave you to it. I'll see you in a little bit.
Thanks so much.
Thank you.
Thanks.
All right, before we start talking about your books, let's talk about the unicorn in the room.
Yes.
When I was prepping for this panel, I went back and looked. I've already gone on the record as saying that Rachel's book, And Now She's Gone, is my favorite book of the year. People are shocked because we're not at the end of the year, but I'm actually reading ahead. So I'm in December, so I'm pretty sure that it'll stay my favorite book of the year.
Mm-hmm.
But when I was doing the research, I realized that for the last 4 years, if I include this year, my favorite book of the year has not only been by a writer of color, but by a female writer of color. So this has given me some hope that maybe this trend we're seeing isn't really a trend and really is a cultural shift. And I was wondering, how are you two feeling about the publishing industry's response to the current social climate?
Can I first explain my outfit?
Sure thing.
Okay. So like you said, there's publishing is not known for being very diverse in crime fiction. And so when I announced my book deal in like 2016,
So long ago.
so I know, right? Like 4 years ago, Rachel slid into my DMs and she said to me, it's like seeing a unicorn, because that's how rare it is to see another Black woman who is traditionally published in crime fiction. At least that's what it was like back then. And so now we kind of jokingly call it, like there's obviously now more of us, but we jokingly call ourselves unicorns because there's so few of us. So
Yes. and I would still say that we are still unicorns.
for
I mean,
sure, compared to other people.
Yeah, comparing us against, white women who write crime fiction and mystery suspense, there's still not a lot of us.
Yeah.
And I'm hoping that it gets better. It's starting to. I'm happy to see publisher launch announcements and, Kellye Steele and Cheryl and Tracy and all these wonderful women writing these great killer stories. I'm hoping that all the protests and all the demands for own voices and Black voices, I hope it continues and that we get to tell our stories, all of our stories.
Yeah, I think that's my concern, because I was a teenager in the 90s. And so I grew up with like Walter Mosley and Barbara Neely and Valerie Wilson Wesley and Eleanor Taylor Bland and Gary Phillips and Garnet Anthony Haywood. And so Like I was around for the last time we were hot in these streets, and it's just the fact that besides Walter and Gar and Gary, I think Gar still publishes his series, you know, but Valerie's coming back, but like they don't publish anymore, and that makes me so sad, you know. And I think there's Kira Davis, but then Rachel, when she came out, what, like 2014, Rach?
Well, my first book, remember, was 2002.
But your first mystery.
Then my first mystery, yeah, that was 2014, and that was after years and years of trying, and folks saying, "Yeah, your voice not Black enough." It's like, well, how is that even possible? So yeah, now here we are, and everyone's voice is Black enough because guess what? Our experiences range East Coast, West Coast, and here we are. And here we are.
I think that's my biggest thing I have an issue with, because I write, like, my books are funny, like they're like Janet Ivanovich, like really funny, lightweight books. And I don't understand why white people can have like serious issue books, and they can have funny books, and they can have good books, and they can have bad books. And we don't get that same opportunity to be able to have every type of book. We should be able to have a beach read where it's not just about how hard it is to be Black, you know, because I love being Black, and some days it's hard and some days it's not, you know, so that's just my life.
The two of you don't need me here because you took some of my questions.
Oh, sorry, you jumped ahead.
But you're right. Like Rachel said, I've been looking at self-awareness every day, and I'm seeing more and more people of color getting promoted to positions of power. So I think that hopefully this is going to change. So I think we're moving in the right direction.
Yeah.
All right, let's talk a little bit about it now you're gone. Now she's gone. It's a bit of a blend of different genres. And when I was reading it, I noticed that it's a traditional PI novel in that you have a missing persons case while they're looking for this missing woman. But then there's a second concurrent thread that is more psychological suspense, even domestic suspense maybe. Was that your plan going in, or did that develop as you were writing the book?
This is a reflection of actually who I am. I'm kind of a mutt, and it actually reflects the Black experience, where we're kind of everything. You can't pin us down because we have, you know, our African heritage, and we have, for many of us, our white heritage and our Native American heritage. We're a mix of things. And so because of that, I take things from that genre and this genre over there. And for a long time, that kind of kept me from, you know, getting that second book deal back in the early 2000s, because I am a kind of a mixture of all these things. And I wanted to take a very important and a very serious subject and make it easy to understand. I wanted to, this book actually came out of the second book that I was trying to write back in 2003. And back then I didn't know how to write it. And it took life experience, hardship, just patience and practice to actually learn how to write it. I had to write the Lou books until it's like, oh, I can use the procedural template to talk about these very important things, but also infuse some of that psychological suspense that was my very first book. So while some of it was intentional, all of it is just my voice and who I am.
Yeah, some chapters even read like thrillers. I mean, some of those chapters, you're just right there with your heart pounding. So it's a blend of all different kinds of things.
Thank you. Thank you.
Similarly, Kellye, the Detective by Day duology. I'm going to call it a duology because
it is a duology.
I don't know if that's a real thing, but that's what we're calling it. Hollywood Homicide, very traditional, cozy, amateur sleuth who desperately needs money and decides she's going to solve a crime to get the reward. But then by the time we get to the second book, Hollywood Ending, it's more, she's a professional PI, she's still learning, but she's now moved into that industry, which is not so commonly seen in cozies. Were you trying to show that the cozies can expand beyond what we're used to?
I think for me, I do try to base my book in realism and being realistic, and it's the idea of like the town and people always stumble upon murders, that's not realistic to me, you know. And I think there's a suspension of disbelief with that, and so I kind of wanted to say just very organically, if she does this first book and she actually really enjoys it, you know, is this something, and she, especially because in that first book, she's very lost career-wise and she doesn't know what she wants to do with her life, you know? And so I think to me that natural progression is, okay, I found something I like to do. I found a mentor. Let me try to do this. But of course, she's not great at it because no one's good at their job the first time, like they first started when they're like an intern or an apprentice. So that's where I kind of came from, was I wanted it to kind of be more of a journey while still obviously keeping that lightweight tone, but just being based in realism. So.
And let's face it, Grayson from And Now She's Gone also isn't so great at this career at the beginning. Right. I mean, she's still struggling. People probably know you, Rachel, for the Lou Norton series. And I think that Lou and Grayson probably share some kind of character DNA, even though they're also very different. So can you tell people who might know you from Lou what they can expect from Grayson?
Grayson is smart, but not smart. You know, those women who have it all together in one area, like Lou, and have mess when they go home, and that's who she is. And like Lou, with her marriage, that's who Lou was. So I would say they're cousins in some ways, that they are very street smart, but they still have things to figure out. For Gray, she's trying to figure out her life, the direction of her life. This is her first case, and like Dana, she's not perfect at this. Like none of us are perfect at our jobs when we first get there. And she makes mistakes. And I wanted to show those mistakes to show that I don't like perfect people, because I don't think perfect people exist. They're not interesting. If you are perfect, you bore me. I like people who have nicks, and I like protagonists who have nicks. And those nicks are the things that kind of throw us off balance. It's like Gray going into an interview without a pen ready. And then the pen she finds doesn't write. And then she has like chocolate on her shirt. And I've been in situations, and I'm sure you both have been in those situations where it's like, oh my God, it's in my teeth. And you think about it, and it takes you out of the moment when you're supposed to be very present. And Gray is trying to be present in a case that resonates with her because of what's happening. She's looking for this woman who may not want to be found. So she's totally off balanced. And that gave me plenty of room to play.
This isn't on my list of questions, but that balance made me think. The name Gray, when in my review, I talked about how it lends us to the fact that she is a multifaceted person. She's not Black, she's not white. I mean, she's like sort of in the middle in all different ways. Was that an intentional name you chose?
Yeah, that was intentional, and Sykes as in psych, that you knew.
Oh, I didn't
because
get that.
I wanted, because she's a mystery to us as a reader, but she's a mystery to herself too. And I wanted, again, to play with that issue of us not really knowing ourselves until we're in that situation. I don't know how I'd feel if XXX happened, and Gray doesn't either. And here she is, she's supposed to be like the expert and looking for people when she hasn't even found who she is yet. So yes, Grayson was a very intentional name, as was Sykes.
Very good. Both of you have written books set in LA. So let's talk a little bit about the setting. What is it about that city that is so crime fiction drawing? I mean, everybody's writing.
Yeah, Kellye.
What is it about it? I mean, for me, I actually was living in LA when I was writing it, and so it was easy to write what you know. I think, there's LA has so many different industries in it, like where they have, people think of it and they think of Hollywood, but they have so many other things are based in Los Angeles, so you have such a cross section of people. Plus you do have people who are coming from other areas, you have your natives, but when I was in LA, most of the people I met were not from LA, so they're coming to fulfill dreams, they're running from things, and so I think that's what it is. It's just such an interesting group of people who are a lot of transplants that are coming. And I think that also helps to kind of why it's such a good melting pot and it has such great stories coming out of it. So.
And for me as a native, I look at all these people coming into the city, and, it's interesting because folks have a perception of what LA is, and they dress what LA is. And for those of us who have lived here our entire lives, it's like, that's not really LA. And I don't really go in that spot. And I don't go there because a lot of transplants go there. So there's that kind of, it is a hometown for us, and it's damn big. You can disappear. And I say this in the opening chapters, you can just, no one and everyone is someone in LA. And I love that type of anonymity. It's perfect. I mean, I've gone to restaurants where we're at Roscoe's Chicken and Waffles, and LL Cool J walks by and no one kind of cares because you and your chicken. And that's the most important thing right now. And that's chill. I like that. And there, you know, I always say this, there are lots of places to put bodies in Los Angeles. There's lots of dark spaces and vacant things. And it's a great city to just disappear and hang out. I love this place.
And a great city for facades. I mean, Grayson's got a facade, and the whole city has a facade. So
we have family friends who are in this. My husband's in the industry in Hollywood, and so he has friends who are. And there's this one couple, and they bought a house, and it's a fixer-upper. And I asked Kim, "Are you going to have Chris, who is a set designer for a studio? Are you going to have him like do all the stuff to build the house up?" And she's like, "No, he builds facades. He doesn't know anything about construction." And it's like, that's true. What would he know about like true measurements? He's just making
the front
look pretty. Yeah.
That's funny.
Poor
Chris got dragged for no reason.
I know. Like, okay, maybe I should not ask him to do anything for me.
We'll stick with setting. Kellye, your 2021 book is going to be set in New York City, correct?
Well, I'm working on something, so it's a work in progress. So right now I am moving. It's a work in progress. It's not finished. But yeah, so I live in New Jersey. People think I live in Los Angeles. And so I, again, write what you know, and it's easier for me to write about New York because now I live, like, this is where I'm from. I'm actually from New Jersey, but to be back there, and I work in New York when I, don't work from home with the pandemic. And so I kind of, with this work in progress, do you guys know who Lyric McHenry is? Have you heard this story? Okay. So she is woman,
yes, the Hollywood, yes.
So she is a woman who grew up with like celebrities. Her dad was like a famous producer. I think he did Jason's Lyric. And she was celebrating her birthday in downtown Manhattan and somehow ended up dead of a drug overdose in the Bronx. And I just, when I saw the headline, and like the headline in the Daily News was so disrespectful, where it was like, Lyric McHenry, pregnant reality star, found dead in the Bronx with cocaine and like in lingerie. And it was such a disrespectful headline that it upset me, because it was like, you would only do that to a Black woman. If that was a Kardashian, you would not have such a disrespectful headline, because it's someone's daughter who passed away. And so that headline got me, and that idea of this person who's kind of like celebrity adjacent, because I like celebrity stories, partying in downtown Manhattan, and how did she get to the Bronx? And at the time I had the idea, like, we didn't know. And so I remember I was walking down the street in Manhattan, and I was like, why would this person be in the Bronx? And all of a sudden I go, oh, she would be there to visit her estranged sister. And so that's kind of the stories from the work in progress, is from the POV of her estranged sister trying to figure out what was going on with her, like the last couple of years that she ends up passed away. So obviously it's not based on Lyric McHenry, other than the fact that it's just the basic circumstances. Because Lyric McHenry sounds like she was an amazing person, where my main character is like a mess, at least the person who passed away. But that's kind of where the idea came from, and kind of it's a bit more serious. It's a bit more, domestic suspense. Thank you. And it still has humor in it because I have it, and so I'm working on it. Hopefully I'll have it done. Hopefully we can sell it, and it'd be great. So,
but what I love about these stories, our stories, is that looking at the duality of women, Black women, women, and the secret lives we lead, and not necessarily tied to men, but just who we are in the privacy of ourselves, and how that can lead to bad things happening to us. And I love this work in progress.
Thank you. And also just the idea of, because one thing I think is interesting is that the psychological suspense market is so big. And like Alexia Gordon, who's another Black woman crime writer, and I talk about it all the time, where it's like, why aren't there more, like, obviously Rachel has written it, but like there aren't a lot of Black women or women of color who are in psychological suspense. And I think it's because it's not the same for us. Like if my baby goes missing, I'm not going to be like, oh, poor Kellye. It's like, oh, she's going to jail because she killed her kid. Like that's what it is, you know? And so I wanted to
kind of, if you get the news story.
Exactly.
Someone actually paying attention.
You know, and so I kind of wanted to kind of figure out if I was going to write a more domestic suspense novel, like what would it be if it was a Black woman in it, you know? And also how would she handle things? And I got some notes from someone and they were like talking like, oh, she seems sometimes so stoic and she's not like very emotional. And I'm like, because Black women, we have to be strong. And at the time she's trying to figure out what the heck happened to her sister. And so she's going to figure that out. And then afterwards she'll mourn and cry. But right now she has on her business of trying to figure stuff out. And so that's was important to me to kind of share that in this story. So,
well, and Gray, when she's dealing with Ian O'Donnell, her client, and he's constantly peppering her with like these microaggressions and just being an asshole because he gets to be, because handsome blonde doctors get to be a lot of things, you know, she can't pop off. And I've said this about like Lou, we can't pop off like that. That is,
then you're angry Black woman.
Then you're angry Black woman. So a lot of it, you bottle it. And in the privacy of yourself, you know, you drink or you watch TV or you talk to your girlfriends, but then when you go out, it's like, I'm okay. And you complain about it, but you know, there's nothing else you can do. And back to you talking about Alexia, and again, all these great stories, you know, a lot of the crime stories, there are only 12 stories ever told basically. But I know that those 12 stories, when Black women tell that same story, it becomes a totally different creature because of what we experience, because of what we see and how we were brought up. You know, it's kind of like how men's stories are different from women's stories. You know, we, as women, we were raised different than men. I mean, Kellye, remember when you used to wear a dress when you were in elementary school, and what did your mama say? Go put on some shorts underneath your dress. Right?
Yes,
you don't want the boys to see your panties. And so, you know, that was another reason why I wrote this story and talking about domestic abuse, is because of bodies, women's bodies, Black bodies, and how they're constantly being regulated and policed and battered, and sometimes no one cares, you know? So we have plenty of stories and experiences to share that are going to be different because of how we were brought up.
Even like me walking down the street at nighttime is going to be a different experience than a man especially a white man walking down the street. You know, like I feel like I've had times where I've turned I remember I was walking down the street one time and it was like 10 o'clock at night in New York City, which is it's still busy. And I was the only person on the street. And I said, you're stupid. Like, why did you walk down the street? You know, but I don't think a man would think that. Like, you know, like the first thing you think is like, I'm always looking around. And if I see one person, I'm scared. If I see two, I'm okay. Because I'm like, okay, that person can help me if this person pops off. Like, you know, but that's constantly what thinking happens as a woman that I don't think men realize.
Yeah.
And then just walking down the street.
For your work.
Yeah.
You know?
So.
Yeah, it resonated with me when you said that there's not a lot of Black women in domestic suspense. It's my favorite genre, but there's also not a lot of LGBTQ relationships.
They're like, they have it worse than we do.
Have domestic lives.
Yeah.
And throw in secrets on top of that.
Right.
I mean, a lot of times, you know, like Lou, she can turn to her family and her friends to help her with her truth.
Yeah.
Being private and your parents not knowing who you are and who you love, and then being threatened, that changes an entire plot. Yeah. You know, sometimes you don't have anyone to turn to because no one knows what's going on.
Yeah. So. I think PJ Vernon has a story coming out. I don't know if it's more thriller or psychological suspense, but I'm super excited. It's called Bathhouse, right? Mm-hmm. It's coming out, I think, 2021. And I'm super excited about that one.
Yeah, I'm looking forward to that.
Yeah.
All right, it seems to me that And Now She's Gone and They All Fall Down are books that feature Black characters, but that are not necessarily focused on the Black experience. Kellye alluded to this earlier. Whereas your incredible short story, Rachel, Down Girl, from the Shattering Glass anthology that was recently released by Nasty Woman Press, is much more politically focused, while it also still tells an entertaining story. Is this, as a white man, a fair distinction for me to make? And do you, if you think in those terms, ever try to balance the two, or are you just going to tell a good story and the politics gets in there anyway?
No, I believe like every story I write is political in some ways. Some are more overt. The Shattering Glass story was definitely more overt. It's about a white woman befriending, let's say that, befriending a Black woman, and it doesn't go well. And I wrote it that way because, one, of the anthology, and two, I had some things to say about, white feminism and how that can be fatal to Black folks. And for my standalones, they may not be overtly political, but they are definitely political. I mean, from Gray not liking how Ian O'Donnell is talking to her and her complaining about that, to just how Miriam, when she goes on the island, how she kind of ticks people off and is very vocal. She is more vocal than any character I've ever written, because she does see slights, she does see prejudice, and she's not afraid to call it out. So all my stuff is political, and it's about the Black experience. It's not like an obvious slave narrative or civil rights era narrative, but it is definitely a story about the Black life in America.
Kellye, you want to jump in with that?
Yeah, I think so. I think that to me the best compliment I ever got about my book was by a Black woman, and I was like reading it on like a gossip forum, and she was like, I just, as a Black woman, just reading this book, I could just, even though I just felt like it was written for me and about me. And I think there's just certain cultural things and certain beat things and certain things like that that are just so ingrained in the Black culture, and it's important to me to kind of share that, even though, again, my books are not quote unquote Black books, my books are about Black people, for everybody. But I especially want Black women to see ourselves in them and to recognize ourselves, because like that's my mom and my dad and my mom and my aunt and my sister, my best friend and my niece who's coming up, who's very sassy, and so I wanted to kind of make sure I, capture that. So
yeah, and I think important that they're authentic. I mean, you have to keep the character authentic, and that I just fear that some people who say they won't pick up these kind of books are afraid that every book is going to be preaching to them about
political,
and that's not what it is.
And for those people, y'all need to get over it. If you're out there, get over that, because when I was a kid, I read every white author who wrote suspense and crime under the sun. I am as far as you can get from Bangor, Maine. And yet I was right there reading it, because there's something about clowns and sewers with eyes like dimes that resonates across races. That's what we're here for. Just because our skins are a different color doesn't mean that, for this book especially, you don't know how it feels. We all know how it feels to feel unsafe in our skin, whether it's pink or it's Black or whatever. We know how it feels to be threatened or to be scared. That's not a race thing. And if I can do it as a little Black girl in the 1980s, reading Stephen King and Jackie Collins and Lucky Santangelo's stories, you can do it too. Stop being lazy. During a pandemic, you can read. Aren't you sick of reading about yourself?
But also, and Alexia says this too, where it's, why can you feel like more connected to an alien and say sci-fi than you can feel connected to a fellow person who happens to have different skin color? Like, like, I don't understand why it's easier for you to identify with that than to identify with me.
Yeah.
Right. It's very strange. I mean, the same thing with LGBTQ people. I mean, I grew up watching relationships on soap operas and stuff, and there weren't gay relationships then, but I could still empathize and understand and be like, oh, someday that's what I want, because we're all human.
Exactly.
Although growing up and watching Laverne and Shirley when I was little, for some reason, I had the idea that they were girlfriends. And I didn't even really know, being 8 or 9, what the whole girlfriends, lesbians, whatever, but I had a feeling that they loved each other like that.
Yeah, couple.
Because they loved each other like that. You know what I mean? And that, I didn't feel weird for thinking that. And now that I think about it now, it makes sense to me now, because love is love.
Same with Bert and Ernie from Sesame Street. I mean, because it's a very strange relationship. They live together. So who knows?
Yeah. Love
Thanks.
them.
Both of you have characters that have groups of friends that help them along the way. So let's talk a little bit about how you crafted those side characters that help them along their journey.
So yeah, I wasn't, again, reading as much as I do and did when preparing like the Lou Norton series, the lone wolf kind of detective, that wouldn't have flown in writing a Black character, because we're always surrounded by friends or church members or parents or siblings, and they're constantly, they're the Greek chorus of your life, because we need each other. I mean, especially now more than ever, we need our group of people to kind of get us through things and get us, since 1619, get us through this American experiment. So to leave, your people out would have just felt wrong. And so I constantly, whenever I'm with my friends, well, back in the day when I got to hang out with my friends, they know to be careful of what they're saying, because I'm listening. I'm listening because I want dialogue. I want ideas. When I can't even remember her name, when Lena, and I think it was Skies of Ash, does like a strip club recital, or yes, the pole dancing recital. One of my friends was actually doing that. She was taking pole dancing classes, and I'm like, that's kind of awesome. And so it found its way in the book. So yeah, I pay tribute to my friends, and their way more wacky lives than mine.
So I come from a television background. When you kind of create pilots and TV shows, you have to have certain characters. You can't just have one person talking to themselves.
Lord.
And so I just obviously had to have different characters. And so for Hollywood Homicide and Dan, I wanted to kind of look at fame, because I think people think of fame, they think of like, oh, you go to LA and the next day you're famous, you're Tom Cruise. And like for every Tom Cruise, there's like literally thousands of people who came to LA and did not make it and left. And so I wanted to kind of examine the different elements of fame, where like Dana used to be famous. There's a character who really wants to be famous, and her best friend roommate, Sienna, her love interest is a guy who's about to be on the brink of fame. And then my favorite backstory is Emmy, who is like her tech person, whereas kind of I took the idea of the Olsen twins, and imagine if like after Full House, like Mary Kate was like, I hate being famous, I don't want to act anymore, and actually became the biggest star in the entire world. And like all you want to do is like go outside and like mind your business, and everyone's like, oh my god, it's Ashley Olsen, like, and so that's where the character of Emmy came from. And that's why she spends so much time in the house, because every time she goes out, people think she's her sister, they're bugging her and like, oh, you look better on TV, and so that's kind of the idea of it, of just looking at fame and different elements with these characters. So
what's Dana's best friend? I can't remember her name.
Sienna.
Yes, I see her as Molly in Insecure for some reason.
Can I tell you, I don't watch Insecure, so shh, but I'm sure that's accurate.
This is a fun little question here. In terms of your writing, and it can be the current book or any of your books along the way, but what's the most interesting thing we'd find in your Google search history?
Everything.
Oh, well, and now she's gone. It was can I buy a dead body? And it had to, do with, identity theft and that kind of thing. So yeah, that was it's a little morbid, but
I can't even think of it. I just remember one time I went to Barnes and Noble, and I basically was asking, like, remember like those, like the dummies guides? I was basically asking a dummies guide to kill somebody. I'm like, do you have a dummies guide about? And I was like, wait, basically I'm asking for a dummies guide of how to kill someone, And so like, that's when I started going more on the internet. But like, this was like 20 years ago, where I was like, is there a dummies guide about this? Or has to be. So I think I'm definitely sure my my Google history is a hot mess. So.
Oh yeah.
All right, another serious topic here. In light of the social reckoning that we're seeing right now in law enforcement and their biased treatment of marginalized communities, particularly as it relates to Black citizens, the lens is shifted to examinations of crime fiction and whether writers are truly depicting accurate portrayals of the police in their novels. First, do you think that's a valid topic to debate? And then secondly, has it, or do you think it will influence how you write police characters moving forward?
I'm in a different place where I come from a family of cops, actually. Like my uncle was a cop, my granddad was a cop, I have cousins who were a cop. But like I remember this guy just did a post on Facebook about my grandfather and saying that if you were in Grand Rapids and when he was a cop and you were getting arrested, you prayed that Robert Scott picked you up because he would treat you with respect. Wow. He was the cop that would not beat you up, wow. You know? And so I think you can still have cops like that. I don't think every cop should be like that. You know, you can definitely have a wide variety. For me, it's more because I still write amateur stuff, even with the current book, The Work in Progress, it's more interactions with cops. And the idea is me as a Black woman, or especially my brother as a Black man, if he gets stopped by the police, the reaction is so different, you know? So I have a scene in this Work in Progress where she's basically kind of doing like a stakeout where she's trying to find something. And she's in like a weird place in Pennsylvania where she's not from. It's not New York City. It's like small town Pennsylvania. And a cop comes up to her and has this moment of like panic of like, keep your hands on the steering wheel. You don't make any sudden movements. Like basically the talk that every Black parent gives their children and when they're teenagers, she's going through the talk her mother gave her, you know? So that's how I kind of see it, because I don't write professional people. I write amateurs. It's more the interactions and how they feel about it and their fear of cops or no fear of cops based on their own experiences and just being Black in America. So,
yeah. And when I wrote the Lou Norton series, she's always been the cop that should be, because like me, she grew up in the 80s Los Angeles, which was Daryl Gates's Los Angeles. And this whole, police abuse is not a new phenomena in Los Angeles. It's the history of our police department is crazy. And so she grew up, as a teenager, going to Westwood, UCLA area to the movies and not being able to drive through Beverly Hills, because if you drive through Beverly Hills, you will get pulled over. That was a thing in the 80s. So she's used to being, Lou was used to, she had a real strange relationship with cops anyway. They didn't look for a sister. Again, the teenager in the 80s. So I wrote her in a way that she was compassionate and that she did believe in community policing. And she was trying to change the culture from within. That's who she was. And the Black women that I've met who are cops, that's who they are. I have cops in my life, but 2 of my neighbors are cops. My daughter's best friend, her dad is a lieutenant in the LAPD. So I know, there's such thing as great cops. However, you have to write the truth, and not every cop cares about serving and protecting. And I'm always going to reflect that in everything that I write, because it's the truth.
Again, back to authentic and accurate.
Yeah.
The pacing of And Now She's Gone, to me, was near perfect. So it's a little technical question here. It's got some steady momentum throughout, but it has walk and breathing room that lets you reflect on things. Is that something that comes out of you naturally when you're writing your first draft, or is that something that happens more in revision, that nailing down of pace? And I'm going to ask you too, Kellye. So
revisions, revisions and the need to stop myself and asking for help to stop myself, because it is so heavy. As I mentioned, when earlier in my career, they didn't know how to market me because, genre wise, I'm all over the place. And also I like, dark humor. And I tend to write about very heavy things. And for me, I want to go, but I now need time to breathe and time to give people space to just exist without having to think about it. And I think part of that is, how I grew up, seeing some intense things, going through cancer when I was pregnant with my daughter, going through intense things, but then stopping to, look at The Simpsons and to laugh and to, just be for a moment. And for Black people in general, we've been, our experience here has not been the easiest, but Blacks will be the first to crack a joke on Twitter especially.
Black Twitter, yeah.
Black Twitter is like, why are you all joking about that? Because if you don't joke about it, then we're just gonna shrivel up and die. We need a breath. So yes, it was craft-wise, but then also how I live my life personally and as a member of, this community of people who turn to these moments to just exist and live without having to keep pressing.
Mine is not as exciting as Rachel's, but I come from a TV background. I come from a screenwriting background, and there's like an 8-sequence structure that you could do in screenwriting. And then there's sequence of calm and let people kind of let the heart rate go down before you build it back up again. So I kind of make sure I do have when I have a climax, I have to have a moment to bring the heartbeat down again before I bring the next big beat and next big reveal, basically letting it breathe. So that's kind of more, to me, I'm more technical, but I'm like a super outliner, 25 pages. So
yeah. Also, when I worked with James Patterson on the book Shots, studying his work so that I can pattern how to write a book like James Patterson, so I could do that. I learned how to, do that kind of pacing with the cliffhangers at the end of every chapter. And so I did get some firsthand experience from a true master of pacing.
Yeah, he's really good at pacing. And it makes sense that he would do that for you too, because it's the same sort of thing. Like the commercial break, you've got to bring people back. After it's over.
Yeah.
All right. I think I already know the answer to this, but do either of you ever think about running away like the characters in And Now She's Gone? I mean, I think we all at some point want to just run away and escape.
See, my problem is, and I've found this with the pandemic and everything, I actually like my family, especially the three of us here in our house. And, the thought of not taking my daughter on vacation and just my husband, I don't even know what that means. And so if I disappeared, it would be with them. And then what's the point? There have been moments where I wish that it would just all go away, especially those times of despair when, I'm dealing with body things and I don't know what's going on. And I just want to be somewhere with a book and just be left alone. It's always with the book. So in some ways, yeah, but I am a socialized hermit. So I like being alone, but I don't mind being amongst people either for some time.
I call myself an extroverted introvert, where I can definitely, if I go to a beacon or I do an event, I'm super friendly. And I was like, Kellye's so great, but then I have to go home and not talk to anybody.
Yeah. It's
for
too much.
hours and hours and hours. I need my alone time too. So I'm similar to that. So.
Okay, before we bring McKenna back in with some audience questions, I'm hoping that our viewers are going to order both of your books tonight. So let's give them some other reading recommendations on what they can put in that shopping cart as well.
I loved Lisa Cole's When No One's Watching.
That was really good.
I absolutely love that. And Tracy Dion's Legend Born. We're doing a panel next week, so I had to read all the stuff. And I don't read much YA, but I read her book in a day. So Legend Born.
Of course, Sean S.A. Cosby's Blacktop Wasteland.
Yes.
I think it's one of the biggest books this year. Stephen King loved it. Tracy Clark series, which just won the Sue Grafton Memorial Award. There's so many great books by Black authors right now in crime fiction. Valerie Burns, who just is a beast when it comes to getting cozies out. Valerie, how do you have time? Because she has 3 series. I'm like, how do you have time? Because she has a day job too. I don't understand how she does it, and there's just so many. And so we actually have a group called Crime Writers of Color that I founded with Walter Mosley and Gigi Pondian. And if you go to crimewritersofcolor.com, we have a books page that you should totally check out. And it's divided by both genres, subgenres, and also by ethnicities. So if you want to expand your reading list, which you should want to do, definitely check that site out. So
it's a great resource, so don't miss that. So, all right, McKenna, do we have some audience questions?
Yes, and I was very quickly dropping links there to Crime Writers of Color and some of the books that you recommended. Of course, my pleasure. I also earlier in the discussion dropped a link to our Black Lives Matter recommended Black Voices tab on our website, because it's at least a good starter guide to some of the things that are in print, both classics by Black mystery authors as well as current series that are going. So that's in there also. I do actually want to do a little housekeeping before we move on to the questions from the audience. So I failed to mention earlier that Rachel sent us signed book plates. So if you do order a copy of her latest book, we'll get a signed book plate in there for you. Also, I am selfishly going to ask Chris to model his I Learned Everything in My Life from Nancy Drew t-shirt. That's one of our Murder by the Book styles. Everything I know I learned from Nancy Drew. Yes, I really appreciate him sporting some Murder by the Book gear tonight. It's pretty funny. We had some people who had a little bit of issues watching the video early on. If you missed the beginning of this, as soon as we wrap up, you can watch it from the beginning. I'm right here on the Facebook page, or I will get it uploaded generally within a couple days to YouTube. Make sure to tag everyone on social media. So if you don't have a Facebook account or someone doesn't have a Facebook account, they can see it on YouTube. A very important question for Rachel. Can you buy a dead body?
Don't answer. Don't implicate yourself.
You can buy identities, not necessarily here in America, but if you read Elizabeth Greenwood's book, Playing Dead or Dead Like Me or something like that, you can learn all about the body industry. I did. It was fascinating. Yeah, unfortunately, well, I guess it's an industry in places that need industry. You can buy a death certificate. Don't take much. I mean, if we all put in right now, we can probably get a.
I have a link to a tip jar ready, so we can work it out after the fact. Yeah, Drew Ann said that you have to answer, so I'm going to take that as your answer. But
hi, Drew. Hi, Drew.
All right, so we have an interesting question from Isaac. Do you think men have any business writing women, specifically Black men writing Black women?
My attitude is write what you want to write, but also if you mess it up, take the L. Don't get defensive, and just say I messed up. I don't know, and I'm not saying that Black men can't write Black women, but just make sure, you create characters, not caricatures, So.
Yeah, I agree.
And that's also especially true for white people who want to write people of color.
Yeah. And to add on to that, for the publishing industry, to honor Black folks writing their own experience or women writing their own experience, you should make an effort to buy those books before buying someone who thinks they know what it is to be a woman, in my opinion.
Yeah, I think we all learned a little bit of a lesson from American Dirt, so we'll see.
Yeah.
Maybe some did, maybe some didn't. All right, let's see. Mary asks you, Rachel, will we see more Lou?
One day. I love Lou. I hope to soon, maybe, or not. I don't know. It depends, especially on if Hollywood rescues the series in some ways, then definitely, yes, I would have great agency to bring her back, but I don't know.
I always feel bad when people ask us that because we don't have control over it. It's the same thing with me where I've had 2 books that my publisher closed and people are like, oh, where's the 3rd book? And like, it's a file on my computer, and that's because I have no control of it unless I wanted to self-publish, which I don't want to do, so I always feel so bad when people ask those type of questions because we have such little control over that.
Yeah. And it breaks your heart because you fall in love with these people.
Lou could be in a short story someday, though.
That is true, actually. I mean, there's enough crime for her to come, like, what would she be doing now, you know? So maybe, yeah, that's a great idea, Chris. I never thought of her being in a short story, but that's exciting.
Well, I'm going to be, I think we got a disappointing answer for Shantae, who wanted to know about a third Detective by Day book.
Sorry, Shantae. Unfortunately, like I said, unfortunately, my publisher closed 3 days before my birthday. 3 years ago. And I was working on it, and it's still, you know, and it's still a file on my computer. And what happens, I like to tell back behind the scenes stuff, you know, when they still have the rights to my first 2 books, which is great because that means they're still available, but it also makes other publishers hesitant to buy a third book because they want to own the rights and get the money for the whole series. They don't want to, like, basically, because a lot of people start a series on book 1. So they don't want to be basically funneling money to someone else, you know. So that's unfortunately how publishing works. It's a business, you know. And so I'm very proud of the 2 books I did, and I would love to one day revisit Dana, but right now I'm just focused on the standalone and hopefully, you know, getting it done and sold. So
yeah, well, it sounds great. So I'm sure we have something to look forward to. Rachel, we have a question from Tori.
Hi, Tori.
She says that domestic violence played a big part with your characters. Did it come out of plot, character, or your own interest in this topic?
Yes.
All that.
I as many of, especially us bookish kids, grow up looking at the people around us in our lives, either in our homes or church, school, or whatever, and we see things that resonate with us and haunt us. And I saw things, you know, growing up that, you know, women that I knew and respected come into places with makeup, and you could see that there's some bruising there and some things swollen there. And as a child of the church, it bothered me that, you know, when you take your marriage vows, it's forever, ever. And it's like, well, even if he hits you, it's like forever, ever. And I just couldn't accept that. And it always bothered me. But it also bothered me that women, you know, always, we quake in our skins. And as I mentioned, you know, earlier, with wearing the shorts underneath your skirt growing up, we're constantly being told that's too short, that's your midriff is showing, no spaghetti straps, and our bodies are constantly being looked at. And so I wanted to take an instance where your body is ultimately being, you know, beat, and how some women stay because of other circumstances. For this woman that Gray knew named Natalie Dixon, you know, Natalie needed love. She was an orphan growing up. And so she was constantly being abandoned. And like so many women, when they find relationships, they will accept what is given to them because they want to be loved. And that ends up, you know, your body is taking the brunt of that so-called love. So I wanted to write it from a personal experience, but I also, you know, the thought of disappearing and what would make a woman want to disappear, and that's, you know, her life and trying to live. So all those things kind of came together in this one entertaining plot.
I don't think we talk about this enough, but I think, for me, I'm Black before I'm a woman. That's just me being honest. And so Black men are like America's number one enemy. And I think sometimes Black women feel the need to protect Black men who don't need to be protected.
Yes. Yes. And so you shut up. And so you take the hit.
Yeah.
And so he didn't mean it. And again, this is one of those areas where it, again, ultimately transcends race, because women are abused. And if you know a woman, or you are a woman, you know what it is to hold your breath. I remember one time driving on the 10 freeway west as a kid, and in the car next to us on the freeway, there was a couple, and he straight punched her and kept going. We're all driving in our cars. I'm in the back seat being nosy, and he hit her, and she stayed in the car with him. And that killed me, because it's like, she has nowhere to go except, as far away from him as she can. And he just kept hitting her. And that stayed with me. And that, it finds its way into stories because I'm trying to figure it all out.
Yeah. On a different note, Aline wants to know if Grayson will return.
I would love for Grayson to return. And if everybody buys a lot of this
that's the thing, you have to buy the book.
You have to buy the book because then, I have 2 books after And Now She's Gone coming out. Who knows what happens after that? So she may, but we'll see. There again, tons of things for her to do and plenty of things to run from.
If you, I know books can be expensive, especially in a pandemic, but you can also ask your library to purchase the book as well. So
yes, libraries are great.
Yeah, absolutely. And, I think the thing that people, as Kellye was talking about earlier, the book industry is a business. So it doesn't matter how much we love those characters sometimes. If the broader audience isn't there, then you might not see more of them. So make sure to tell your friends about the books you love, buy the books you love, do everything you can
to the books you love.
Yeah, yep, exactly. So Drew also asks, and I think this applies to both of you, what is the difference between writing a series and a standalone? Do you have more leeway to venture out? Why don't we start with Kellye this time?
Venture out with the standalone or the series?
Probably, do you have more leeway to venture out with the standalone? Like, do you feel locked into a series? And if I'm misreading that, Drew, just correct me.
I think for me, the struggle with my series is like I would do a lot of things I thought I was cute in the first book, and then you're locked into it. Like I have a character named Aubrey who talks very serious, and he doesn't even use he's just like, I'm very serious. And he's such a pain in the butt to write. Like I was so mad at myself by book 3. Like, why did you do that? But I was stuck with it because I thought I was cute, So I think that's the problem, is that you kind of create these things in book 1 that you have to deal with. And a reader will tell you if you mess up, oh no, you messed that up. Her eye color is not blue. That to me is the biggest difference. For me, the standalone I'm working on, it's fun because I have to, on one hand, it's all new characters, which is a lot of work, but, I get to create these stories and I can always, change things as I'm writing too. So,
yeah. For me, I would say there's more freedom with a standalone because taking this story, which is told, from Grayson's point of view and the point of view of Natalie Dixon, this wouldn't have worked it wouldn't have been as personal a story as it is now with Gray than if it was a Lou story, because Lou's a cop. She can't do certain things. She can't ask certain questions. I don't write Lou that she's this lone wolf going off the grid because, again, Black women don't get to do that much. So Gray gets to do a lot of things that Lou does not. And so in many ways, the standalone idea is freeing. There is no history except the one, that you create fresh for this specific character.
Yeah. We have one more question from the comments. If someone else has anything you'd like me to ask, type it in really quickly. So Quincy would like to know from both of you, what's a writing project besides what you're currently working on that you want to write?
I want to write a cult book. I don't know what that is, but I'm watching The Vow right now on HBO. And, I've read almost every Jim Jones nonfiction book that's out. Because I'm fascinated by, people doing things, thinking they're in a safe space, and they're not. And so I want to write that book. I just don't know how to write it yet. So it's still bubbling. I'll get to it.
Yeah. How about you, Kellye?
No, we can't hear you, Kellye.
Can you speak? We lost some volume. Try again. Okay. I'm going to circle back to you. We made it 59 minutes without incident, so we're almost there. But I'm going to move on to something, and then we'll come back. So I wanted to give a second to Chris to tell us a little bit about Bolo Books. And then also, because we have so many people who are watching these videos to learn about the authors that they've never read. I always feel like it's a good thing to give the author a chance to do just an elevator pitch for their book, because we've had an in-depth discussion, but we haven't had just a tell me about your book in 2 sentences. So Chris, tell us a little bit about Bolo, and maybe Kelly's audio will come back, and then we'll talk to them.
Bolo Books is a blog I started in 2012, and it's just good reviews. I don't do any negative reviews, so if I don't like a book, you won't hear about it on the blog. So if you're looking for positive energy in this difficult time, come to the blog, check out, and you'll see some books that you should be reading. I don't really cover a lot of bestsellers. I usually cover these lesser known voices. So you can always discover new stuff there.
I know those of us at Murder by the Book really appreciate your blog, because we kind of live by those same principles. We find no value in trashing someone's work. We only try to build up things, and also, you know, the bestsellers are bestsellers out there. Our favorite thing are discovering new voices, and so I enjoy reading you, and I think you always do such great reviews. So if those of you watching don't know Chris and Bolo Books, make sure to check him out. He does a great job out there. And Rachel, tell us about, oh my God, the name just went out of my head.
Now she's gone?
Now she's gone. Yes, I'm so sorry.
So it's a story about young in her career PI, Grayson Sykes, who gets her first case, and that's to find a woman who wants to stay missing. So it's a cat and mouse game between her and the missing woman, Isabel Lincoln. And it's out now. It's out today.
Out today, and we all love it. And we also love, if you're a paperback reader, They All Fall Down is last year's book, and that was a big favorite of ours, also a standalone. Thank you, Kellye. So it is available in paperback. If your budget is slightly smaller, we highly recommend it too. Kellye, how's your audio? No. I'm so sorry. Oh,
Higher books anyway. They're excellent. Hollywood Homicide.
Hollywood Homicide. And exactly. They're both there. We have copies in stock. You can't go wrong. And I guess on that note, we're going to go ahead and wrap up this evening, since we've effectively muted Kellye. Oh, it would have been funny if it came on right then.
That would have been awesome.
Okay. Well, all joking aside, thank you all so much. It's been an absolute pleasure for me. I really am appreciative of Kristopher for taking the time to moderate tonight. And congratulations to you, Rachel, for your new book. And Kellye, keep working on the new one. I can't wait to read it. Meanwhile, we have Hollywood Homicide in stock. You guys have a great evening. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Bye.